We begin this hour with a promise, Donald Trump's promise to launch the largest deportation operation in American history. It was a centerpiece of his 2024 presidential campaign. But to say that he's merely fulfilling that promise misses the far more troubling reality. The methods that this administration has deployed are extreme, threatening not just undocumented immigrants, but the entire rule of law in America. What we're witnessing today is no longer just about immigration policy. It's quickly morphed into a horrifying crackdown that appears to target anyone perceived as an ideological threat. And it's part of a broader assault on the Constitution, on courts, the lawyers who uphold the rule of law, higher education, and Trump's critics overall. Wherever you stand on immigration, what we're witnessing is far more dangerous and deeply alarming than simply an immigration crackdown. From day one, this administration began militarizing the U.S.-Mexico border, targeting asylum seekers, launching raids in immigrant communities, spreading hysteria about a phantom gang invasion supported by the Venezuelan government. Trump's deportation dragnet has been incoherent and all-consuming, sweeping up college students, legal residents, green card holders, U.S. citizens, including babies. Just this week, a construction worker in South Alabama said ICE agents violently detained him, falsely claiming that his proof of citizenship was fake. He was released hours later. He's not the first U.S. citizen to be targeted, and if these methods continue, he won't be the last. The stories are chilling. Masked agents dragging away college students in broad daylight. International students and academics abruptly transferred across state lines. People flown thousands of miles away to foreign prisons notorious for human rights abuses. No charges. No evidence, just vague accusations of gang affiliation or supporting Hamas or perhaps considering taking ideological positions contrary to U.S. foreign policy interests in the future. Hundreds of people in 2025 America just disappeared. This is the stuff of dictatorships, and the damage doesn't stop there. It ripples through our economy, through our institutions, and our global standing. International students, for example, they're neither a menace nor a charity. International students alone contributed $44 billion to the U.S. economy last year. They are a key part of our global competitiveness. Deporting them weakens the country as a whole, not just culturally and intellectually, but economically. At what point does the goal become so distorted that it's no longer even credible? Americans are starting to ask that question. Across party lines, voters are expressing alarm. A recent Economist YouGov poll of U.S. adult citizens found 60% believe the government must explain deporting someone to a country they're not from. 64% say the administration must obey court orders in deportation cases. A CNN poll of U.S. adults from April found that 52% say Trump has gone too far in deporting undocumented immigrants. That's up, by the way, from 45% in February. That same poll found that 57% of Americans believe the federal government is not following the law when carrying out deportations. I'm quite surprised that those majorities aren't higher. But the takeaway here is that public opinion, regardless of underlying policy, shifts when basic rights are visibly under attack. Courts have pushed back. Multiple federal judges, including the Supreme Court, have ruled against Trump's deportation actions. Just yesterday, a federal judge ordered the administration to facilitate the return of a Guatemalan man who was wrongfully deported to Mexico, where he had been previously kidnapped and raped. But the administration continues to ignore, defy, or otherwise work around these court rulings. In addition to El Salvador, the administration has gone so far as to secretly ship migrants to South Sudan, defying a Supreme Court order. At the center of it all is a dangerous legal theory that the president's word is law. And here's the glaring irony that should offend each and every American. Trump owes his freedom, perhaps even his presidency, to the very due process protections that he's now trying to dismantle. Throughout his first term and throughout his second campaign, his legal teams used every tool in the book to delay trials and avoid consequences. Now that he holds power, he claims America can no longer afford those protections. He said it would take 200 years to give every immigrant a fair trial. White House advisor Stephen Miller was even more blunt, declaring, if you illegally invaded our country, the only process you are entitled to is deportation. And their crusade extends far beyond immigrants. Trump is now publicly directing the Justice Department to investigate his political opponents. Since taking office, the 47th presidency of the United States has launched an unprecedented assault on the core tenets of American democracy: due process, the rule of law, checks and balances. Every extreme measure that we, the public, tolerate brings us one step closer to the next, even more extreme step, until one day it reaches your doorstep. Trump has made no secret of wanting to deport U.S. citizens to foreign prisons, and this may only be the beginning. One of his first executive orders references the 1807 Insurrection Act, raising the possibility of him deploying U.S. troops into American neighborhoods. And with time on his side, Trump is testing how far he can stretch and ultimately break the limits of executive power. Let's be very, very clear about this. Regardless on where you stand as it relates to immigration policy, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or you're not affiliated with a political party, this is no longer about immigration. It's about the country we want to live in, the kind of country our children will inherit, and what we're willing to accept from those we've entrusted with power. The federal government, every part of it, was created and designed to serve the people. Yet under this administration, believing in process and the rule of law has somehow become taboo, a source of weakness and shame rather than strength and pride. Today's Republican Party seems to have forgotten a fundamental truth. America's system of government owes its very existence to one principle, the will of the people. A fact uncontested since the nation's founding, a fact enshrined in the Constitution, has now become debatable. Republicans want you to believe that a government that centers its people is somehow broken, that it's not the government's role to protect the average citizen from what FDR called the hazards and vicissitudes of life. As Keisha Matos, the president of the National Immigration Law Center, warns, quote, while the assault on immigrants demands our concern, we must also recognize it as the opening step toward dismantling everyone's rights. If we continue to normalize disappearances, silence foreign students, carry out detention without charges or trial, applying these tactics to political opponents who are citizens will require little extension. And if military forces kick in your neighbor's door, the moment to speak without fear will have already passed. Trump is counting on our fear to command our silence. Rather than acquiesce, we must speak up to defend our increasingly fragile democracy before it vanishes entirely. End quote. Joining me now, Dean Obeidallah, host of SiriusXM's The Dean Obeidallah Show and an MSNBC daily columnist. Dean, we've crossed a big red line here. What Donald Trump campaigned on and what a lot of people thought was reasonable to deal with our broken immigration policy is no longer about that.
No, and I think you make such a great point. This is not about immigration. Regardless where you feel on that issue, Democrat or Republican, it's something bigger than that. And I think the fact it's Memorial Day weekend gives us a moment to pause. People made the ultimate sacrifice. They did it for something that you mentioned in your monologue there, and that word is freedom. And I'm writing an article right now. I was looking back at the very first speech in the modern day Memorial Day, which was Representative James Garfield, before he's president, 1868, Arlington, to Joe Biden's. I looked at all different presidential speeches, and the one word that came up in all those speeches, freedom. Freedom. And that's what makes us Americans. And Donald Trump is going after everything. Freedom of speech in ways we've never seen. I mean, a judge just ruled on Friday protecting the law firms, saying you're going after dissent, going after universities. I had Professor Stephen Levinsky on my show, co-author of How Democracies Die, saying every autocrat goes after universities because they are independent centers of dissent. People thought he's going after media outlets. He's going after Democrats. They're arresting judges. The mayor of Newark, they dropped the charge because they had no case. Then a Democratic member of Congress, they opened up investigations to Act Blue because it's a platform to help Democrats raise money. There's now an investigation to Media Matters. Angela Corsone's, the FTC is beginning an investigation. Yep. This is a re-envisioning of what America is about. And I think you sum it up so well. This really is a push and pull between two competing visions of America. One that we believe in as freedom, United States of America with due process, and their vision, which is an autocracy, and that really what we're dealing with, or easier than that, a dictatorship. They want Trump as the dictator of the United States, and we all have to bow down to him.
So what people are starting to recognize is that in order to dismantle these freedoms of which you speak, whether it's freedom of speech or whatever the case is, it is the processes that we're dealing with. So this administration won't tell you that they're fighting freedom. They're just telling you that Harvard's got to get rid of its foreign students and that these migrants are not entitled to a due process hearing, by the way. These are not trials. Donald Trump says it'll take 200 years. His math, once again, is just wrong because Abrego Garcia was not entitled to a full jury trial. If the government wants to deport you, they're probably going to succeed. But regular folks are realizing that if you take the due process away, that's where your freedoms disappear.
Absolutely. It's the only thing that keeps us between us being North Korea. You know, this week we saw two big things that I think are very jarring. Kristi Noem, Homeland Security Secretary, testifies about what habeas corpus means.
Right.
She said it's the president's right to deport you. She doesn't.
Just not at all, yeah.
That wasn't a mistake, though. That's not a gaffe. That's what they think in the administration. They told her. She's not a lawyer. she probably said, what's habeas corpus? And they said, oh, it's Donald Trump's right to deport who he wants. And she just regurgitated that. And we saw J.D. Vance say this week in an interview with the New York Times that he thinks the Supreme Court's making a mistake saying their job is to control the excess of the executive branch.
Right.
And he said, no, the court should be stopping other courts from stopping the will of Donald Trump and the will of the people. Like the idea that he won an election and he can then overrule the United States Constitution if it's inconsistent with his agenda now in office.
Except that we have had Supreme Court ruling after Supreme Court ruling, which has encouraged Donald Trump, right? Whether it's the immunity ruling or it was Chevron or this week, Humphrey Executor, these ideas that this is an imperial presidency. Lots of presidents have done this, right? When it's your person, you don't really seem to care that much when they're in office. But presidency after presidency has become more imperial, and now we are feeling like we're at a tipping point.
Look, Project 2025, this playbook, you've covered it nonstop. You had the whole book out here. It has really covered a lot from Hungary for Viktor Orban, who took what was really a robust democracy. Now it's like this hybrid autocracy.
They still have elections.
Right. It's a competitive.
They still vote, but nobody can win except Orban, apparently.
Right. So experts call it competitive authoritarianism. So you can win local elections, you just won't win the national ones.
Right.
But to achieve that, they took over the universities, took over media outlets, went after political opponents, destabilizing, delegitimizing them. Trump is copying all of it. I don't know what to do to reach out to our fellow Americans who aren't paying attention and don't understand this is beyond not normal. This is a different vision of America. Today's GOP, again, according to Stephen Levitsky, is no longer a political party as we know it. It's an authoritarian movement come to life. And so we have to deal with it that way. Normal rules don't apply in the way it's covered. There are not two sides to authoritarianism and fascism. So I think even in the media and even the way we talk about it with our friends is it's America or it's Trumpism.